What's up, YouTube? How you doing? This is Dika from my neck of the woods. Welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about what makes a good hunting arrow. Before I get started, if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the channel, like any comments, ring the bell. They'll alert you of any new videos I got coming out. So, what makes a good hunting arrow? Now, obviously, this is my opinion. There are some sort of trendy things that are going on YouTube, anything from Ed Ashby to the Ranch Fairy, the Hunting Public, all these guys, they're talking about forward of center. Now, I believe that that's one of the main things that make up a good hunting arrow. It's predominantly, I think it's weight. Forward of center is the main weight. You want it up front. But I think an overall weight is helpful as a hunting arrow. And the other thing is spine. You want your arrow spined properly to whatever weight you decide to shoot. Even if it's a 400 grain arrow or a 300 grain arrow, you want to make sure that it's spined correctly. And that way you're going to get the most energy in your arrow than if it wasn't spined. I'm going to give you an example here. So rather than hold an arrow, I'm going to hold a ruler, right? And I'm going to talk about forward of center for a little bit here. So if you follow the Ranch Fairy or Ed Ashby or any of these people, it's all about forward of center, and it seems to be very, very trendy on YouTube right now. But it's not new information. It's old information. It's information that's been in existence for hundreds of years. In our forefathers, when they tied rocks to sticks, it was all about forward of center. Now, whether or not they had a name for it, who knows? But that's what it was. It was heavy in the front. So when you shoot your arrow, right? So say your balancing point is right in the middle at 6 inches, right? So the only place that it's going to flex is in the front 6 inches. That's where it's going to flex. And then the back half of the arrow is the pushing. It pushes and then it flexes past the center point, and that's where you're going to get the flex. So the idea about moving the forward of center up, moving the balancing point up, meaning less of the arrow is going to flex. That, in turn, you don't waste any energy. The arrow flight is more smooth, so to speak. There's less flexion coming out of the arrow. But in order to do that, you have to get a lot of things correct. You have to get the spine correct, and you have to get the weight correct for your bow based on poundage and draw length and how long your arrow is. So we'll use a 30-inch arrow from now on, right? 30-inch arrow, and say you're shooting 55 or 60 pounds. Now, there's a spine chart out there, and you'll sort of follow down the A axis and the B axis, and you meet a point, and you say, like, your draw length is 29 inches, and your draw weight is 55. You meet in the middle, and it tells you what the spine is. But when you start messing around with it and you start putting inserts in and increasing your forward of center, there's no guideline to follow. There's no chart. So you have to kind of wing it until you can figure it out. And with your spine, you always want to go stiffer. You don't want to go less. You don't want a weaker arrow if you're adding more weight to the front. So this is your arrow. And your arrow comes out of the bow, right? And say it doesn't have a broadhead on it. It just has a field point. It has a 100 grain field point. It's going to come out, and say your flexion point, your balance, when you balance your arrow, it's right in the middle. So it's the string that's pushing it, and then the point weight in the front is going to cause flexion. And from here to here is going to flex. So if you add a 125, your balancing point is going to be a little bit closer to the front, and only that part's going to flex. Now, what we're seeing on YouTube is we're seeing people go to extremes, and I'm one of them also. So my forward of center is about 23%, which means my balancing point is probably around here. It's about half the distance from the center point to the broadhead or the tip. And what I've noticed is that it really calms the bow down, and you don't waste any energy on the flexion. So I shoot 55 pounds, and I shoot a 670 grain arrow. Now, granted, I haven't shot it at an animal yet. My opening day is tomorrow, so hopefully I get a shot this season to actually see in real life what it's capable of. But I have noticed that my bow is much quieter, and the trajectory of my arrows, they're almost perfect. Prior to that, I shot a 340 spine. I thought I shot Easton Access arrows. Now I shoot a 240, and I have a 200 grain broadhead up front, and I have a 30 grain outsert. It's more just for integrity of the end of the arrow. All right, so weight, overall weight, I think is great. But if you can increase the forward of center, if you can increase that flexion point any little bit, long as it goes forward, you're going to have better arrow flight and more integrity on the front half of the arrow. I mean, there's push for single bevels and all these cutthroats and machine steel broadheads, but I think even with any change in forward of center, you're going to get better penetration and you're overall going to have a better hunting arrow. And then your spine, you got to make sure it is spined correctly. So when the arrow gets put under a lot of pressure, so you want it to just work on the heavier side as opposed to the lighter side. 250s or 350s, I think, are really going to be in everyone's wheelhouse out there, unless you're shooting upwards of 80 pounds and you have a 32-inch draw length and you're shooting a 33-inch arrow. Then you might be in trouble. I don't even know if they make something less than a 250. So anyway, weight, overall weight, if you can do forward of center, I think it's a great idea. But if you don't want to or you don't believe in it or whatnot, I think just having a heavy arrow, momentum over speed, is going to give you better penetration, and overall it's a better hunting arrow. And make sure you're spining it correctly. And most spine manufacturers, the lower the number, the stiffer the spine. They start at like 500, 450, 400, 350, 240, or whatnot, and they become stiffer as they go. But not all manufacturers are like that. And then broadhead weight. Now, keep in mind, the more you put on the front, the stiffer the spine you're going to need, because it's almost like it pushes into a wall when it has that extra weight, and it's going to cause that flexion there. All right, that's all I got for you. That's just my little tidbits on forward of center and what I think the best hunting arrow is. Weight and proper spine. I think any broadhead will perform with forward of center. I mean, some of them might break or whatnot, but overall you're going to get the penetration. You could even use a mechanical with forward of center, but a lot of them don't come past 125 grains. You could always put an insert in the end of it. That could be helpful. I'm a fan of fixed blades, but I mean, if you're set on your mechanicals, just make some forward of center. Put an insert in the front, a 100 grain insert, a 200 grain insert, a 80, a 25. I think anything helps. All right? You all be well. Subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you guys next time.